I used to think the warning was just something adults told kids to keep them from playing in storms. In our town, whenever dark clouds rolled in and the air turned heavy, someone would always say the same thing, in the same flat tone: hide when it rains. Not stay inside, not be careful, hide, as if the rain itself was looking for us. As a kid, that wording terrified me more than any monster story ever could, because no one would explain why. I grew up in a small, forgettable town tucked between long stretches of forest and an abandoned highway no one used anymore. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets didn't exist so much as they were collectively ignored. The rule about the rain was one of those secrets. Parents would close the curtains, lock the doors, and turn up the television whenever the first drops fell. School would end early. Streets would empty in minutes. If you asked questions, you were told to stop being curious and do what you were told. Okay. The first time I remember the rain feeling wrong, I was 9 years old. I was walking home from my friend Lucas's house when the sky darkened so suddenly it felt like night had fallen out of nowhere. The air went still, birds vanished, even the insects went quiet. Then the rain started. Thick drops slapped against the pavement, darker than they should have been, leaving stains that didn't immediately wash away. I froze, staring at my hands as a few drops landed on my skin, warm and sticky instead of cold. A woman screamed somewhere down the street, and I ran the rest of the way home, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My mother dragged me inside before I could even close the door, her face pale, her hands shaking as she bolted every lock. She didn't ask why I was late. She didn't check if I was hurt. She just pulled the curtain shut and whispered, "Don't look outside. Whatever you hear, don't look." That night, I heard footsteps on our porch. Slow, careful, like someone taking their time. I didn't sleep. Years passed, and nothing like that happened again, at least nothing I could prove. People moved away quietly. Houses stayed empty longer than they should have. Sometimes you'd hear a name mentioned once, then never again. I told myself it was coincidence. Small towns lose people all the time. Still, every time it rained, I felt that same tightness in my chest, that same sense that the world was holding its breath. I left as soon as I could. College, work, anywhere but there. I didn't come back until my father died, and even then, I planned to stay just long enough to settle things and leave. The town looked the same, but something about it felt thinner, like a place worn down by waiting. People avoided eye contact. Windows stayed covered even on clear days. And when the forecast mentioned rain, conversations stopped mid-sentence. On my third night back, the clouds rolled in again. Darker than I remembered. Lower. The air pressed against my skin, making it hard to breathe. I stood in my childhood bedroom, suitcase half-packed, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then someone knocked on the front door, not hard, not urgently, 3 slow, deliberate taps. I checked the clock. It was raining. I stood there listening to the knock echo through the house, each tap spaced far enough apart that I had time to imagine what might be waiting on the other side. The rain had already picked up, drumming against the roof in a thick, uneven rhythm that made the walls feel hollow. I told myself it was probably a neighbor, maybe someone who didn't know I was back yet, maybe someone who needed help. That thought scared me more than the alternatives, because helping would mean opening the door. The knocking came again, 3 taps, identical to the first. The knocking came again. Calm, patient. I didn't move. I remembered my mother's voice from years ago, sharp with fear. Don't look. Don't open. Hide. My hand hovered near the light switch, then dropped. I backed away from the door instead, my footsteps quiet against the old carpet. Hello? A voice called from outside. It sounded normal. That was the worst part. Familiar, even. Like someone trying not to scare me. "I know you're in there," the voice continued. "You came back." My stomach tightened. I hadn't told anyone I was arriving that day. The rain hit harder, the drops smearing against the windows like oily fingerprints. I edged toward the front window and stopped myself inches from the curtain. I could feel something pulling at my curiosity, urging me to peek, to confirm there was nothing there. The voice sighed. "You don't remember yet. That's okay."
Matt, you will.
The footsteps moved away from the door, slow and deliberate, circling the house. I heard them pass beneath my window. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my back against the wall, counting my breaths the way I used to when storms scared me as a kid. And eventually, the sounds faded into the rain. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed until morning, waiting for the knock to come back, listening for any sign that I wasn't alone. When the rain finally stopped just before dawn, the silence felt heavier than the storm. I checked every room, every lock, every window. Nothing was disturbed. No footprints. No sign anyone had been there at all. At breakfast, my neighbor Mrs. Calder caught me outside as I was taking the trash out. She looked older than I remembered, her face drawn tight as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes flicked to the sky, then to the wet pavement. "You stayed in," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. My voice sounded thin. She nodded once, relief flashing across her face before it vanished. "Good. Some people forget, or they think it won't happen to them." I wanted to ask what happened if you didn't hide. I wanted to ask who had knocked on my door. Instead, I asked the question that felt safer. "How long has this been going on, Mrs.?" Calder's mouth pressed into a line. "Longer than anyone alive remembers, longer than this town." She bowed the pasa prof the treat was shod upon the grapt. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The rain doesn't just fall here. It comes back. It looks for what it lost." Before I could ask what that meant, she straightened and walked away, already pretending the conversation had never happened. That afternoon, I went to the local library hoping old records might explain what no one would say out loud. The librarian, a thin man with tired eyes, watched me too closely as I searched through town histories and yellowed newspapers. Most articles about storms were missing pages or had been clipped out entirely. Dates didn't line up. Death notices appeared without causes. Entire families vanished between one issue and the next. As I was leaving, the librarian spoke without looking up. "If it rains tonight," he said, "don't answer anyone. Not even if they know your name." Outside, clouds were already gathering again. The rain started just after sunset, as if it had been waiting for the sky to darken before returning. I noticed it first by the way the air changed, the pressure dropping so suddenly my ears popped. Then came the sound, light at first, almost polite, before growing heavier and more insistent. I closed the curtains without turning on any lights. I closed the curtains with Borv, moving through the house like a guest who wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to distract myself with the television, but every channel cut to static within minutes. The radio did the same, dissolving into a low hiss that reminded me of distant breathing. I shut everything off and sat in the dark, counting seconds between thunderclaps that never came. The rain didn't need thunder, it had its own presence. That was when I heard footsteps again. They were softer this time, pacing slowly along the porch. Whoever it was knew exactly where to step to make the floorboards creak just enough to be heard. I curled my fingers into the couch cushion, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would give me away. And a shadow passed in front of the living room window, stretching and distorting as it moved. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, remembering every warning I'd ever been given. Don't look. Don't answer. Hide. The knock came anyway. 3 taps, calm, patient. "Please," the voice said. "It's getting harder to stay out here." Something about that sentence made my throat tighten. Not fear exactly, but recognition. I'd heard that voice before. Not recently. Free for Perser. Not even as an adult. It sounded like a memory. You used to be so good at this, the voice continued, closer now. You knew where to hide. You knew how long to wait. My mind flashed to childhood images I hadn't thought about in years. The old wardrobe in my room. The way my mother would pull me inside and shut the door, her hand over my mouth. Both of us listening as rain battered the house. I'd always thought she was afraid of storms. I'd never considered she might be afraid of something else. Came. The doorknob turned slowly, stopping when it met resistance. A soft laugh followed, almost fond. Still locked. That's smart. I pressed myself deeper into the couch, every muscle screaming to run, even though there was nowhere safer to go. The rain intensified, the sound seeping into the walls, the floor, my bones. It felt closer now, like it was inside the house with me, moving through the pipes, whispering through the vents. Like from somewhere down the hall, I heard another sound, a wet, dragging noise, like fabric being pulled across tile. It grew louder, nearer, until it stopped just outside the bedroom door. "Don't hide in there," the voice at the front door called out. "That's not where you used to go." I clamped my hands over my ears, but the words still reached me, sliding into my thoughts like they belonged there. Images surfaced uninvited. A younger me crouched in the wardrobe. Another child beside me shaking, his face turned away from mine. I couldn't remember his name, only the way his hand slipped from mine when the rain got louder. The dragging sound retreated, replaced by silence so thick it made my head spin. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the voice whispered directly beside me, so close I felt breath against my ear. "Next time," it said gently, "you won't remember to hide." The rain stopped all at once. Fox. No fade. No drizzle. Just sudden, crushing quiet. I stayed where I was until morning, afraid that if I moved, I'd confirm what I already suspected. When daylight finally crept through the curtains, the house looked ordinary again. Empty. Safe. But I knew better now. The rain hadn't left. It was just waiting. You know, I didn't leave the house that morning. I told myself it was exhaustion, that anyone would need time to recover after a night like that, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid the moment I stepped outside, something would notice. The town looked different in daylight, stripped bare by the rain. Puddles dotted the streets, darker than normal water, reflecting the sky in a way that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. I avoided them, stepping wide as I walked to the kitchen. There was mud on the inside of my front door. And not a lot. Just a smear near the bottom, as if something wet had been dragged across the threshold and then wiped away. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, replaying every second of the night before. I was sure I hadn't opened the door. I was sure nothing had come in. Still, the mark was there, undeniable. I cleaned it up and immediately regretted it. The water in the sink turned cloudy, then dark, then cleared again, as if nothing unusual had happened. My hands felt numb afterward, tingling like they'd fallen asleep. I scrubbed them until they were red. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, and the town was the only place to find them. The old part of Windermere. I drove to the old part of Windermere, where the houses leaned closer together, and the streets felt narrower than they should have been. That's where the longest residents lived, the ones who remembered things. I found Miss S. Calder sitting on her porch, staring at the sky despite its clear blue emptiness. When she saw me, her expression tightened. "You heard it," she said. Again, not a question. "It talked to me," I replied. "It knew things it shouldn't." She closed her eyes, nodding slowly. "Then it started remembering you, that word again." "Remembering. What is it?" I asked. "What happens when it rains?" "Mysis." Calder hesitated, then gestured for me to sit. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "When the rain comes, it's not weather, it's a door." And sometimes something comes through, not all at once. Not fully. It needs help. Help from who? From us, she said. From the ones who survived it before? My chest tightened. Survived what? She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes sharp and sad. You don't remember the first time. You don't remember the first time, do you? Images flooded my mind. The wardrobe. The dark. Another child's hand in mine. Another child's hand in mine. The sound of rain swallowing his scream. I shook my head, but it felt like lying. There was an accident, Mrs. Calder continued softly. Years ago, children caught in the rain. Most didn't make it back, a few did. But something followed them. Something that learned their names, their voices, their fear. I stood up abruptly, my stomach churning. You're saying this is my fault? I'm saying it knows you, she replied. And knowing is how it comes closer. As if summoned by the words, clouds began to gather on the horizon. Too fast, too dark. People on nearby porches retreated indoors, doors slamming, curtains snapping shut. My cess. Calder gripped my arm. If it calls you again, she said urgently, don't answer, don't move. And whatever you do, don't let it remind you of who you were with that night. Why? Her grip tightened painfully. Because if you remember them completely, she said, you won't be hiding anymore. You'll be going back. The first drop hit the pavement as I ran for my car. The rain started before I reached the end of the street. Not a storm at first, just a slow, deliberate tapping, like fingers testing glass. I barely made it inside my house before the sky opened fully. I locked the door, then locked it again, even though I knew locks didn't matter to something that didn't need hands. And the voice came almost immediately, not from outside this time, from the hallway. Do you remember now? It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It spoke the way memories do, soft, intimate, unavoidable. I stood frozen in the living room, my back against the door, staring down the dark corridor that led to the bedrooms. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting shadows that leaned in the wrong directions. Eh, I told you to hide, the voice said, and now it sounded disappointed. You always forget the most important part. I squeezed my eyes shut. Calder's warning echoed in my head. Don't answer. Don't move. Don't remember. But the rain was helping it. Each drop felt like a knock against my skull, loosening things I'd buried for decades. The memory broke through anyway. We were kids, 6 of us. Summer rain, sudden and heavy. Laughter turning to panic as the adults shouted. Someone grabbed my hand. Evan, my best friend, we ran, slipping in the mud, hiding where we always hid. The wardrobe in my parents' house, dark, crowded. The sound of rain too loud, too close. And then the voice promising safety. Promising it would pass if one of us came out. I opened my eyes, gasping. The hallway was no longer empty. Something stood there, just past the reach of the light, tall, uneven, as if it hadn't fully decided on a shape. Its surface shifted like wet shadows pressed together. Where a face should have been, there was only suggestion, dense, where eyes might go, a stretch where a mouth could form if it wanted to. You, Evan, it said gently, you left him. No, I whispered before I could stop myself. The thing leaned closer. The air grew cold, thick, heavy with the smell of rain-soaked earth. You hid, it said. You listened. You survived. That's why I chose you. Images flooded me, new ones, awful ones. Evan stepping out. Evan turning back. The rain swallowing him whole. Not tearing, not breaking, just taking. Folding him into itself like he'd always belonged there. My knees gave out. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my head. I was a kid. I sobbed. I was scared. I know, it said. And for the first time, there was something like warmth in its voice. That's why I need you now. The rain intensified, drumming against the house with violent insistence. I felt it pressing in, seeping through cracks I couldn't see. The thing extended an arm, too long, bending wrong. and pointed toward the front door. "It's time to stop hiding," it said. "Someone has to remember all of us." I thought of Miss S. Calder, of the empty houses, of the children who grew up and never knew why the rain made them uneasy. I realized then what the town's rule had really been for. Hiding wasn't to protect us. It was to delay the choice. I dragged myself upright and shook my head. "No," I said, louder this time. "I won't help you. I won't." "Oh, Savante." The thing paused. The rain faltered, just for a second. "You already are," it replied. And the front door creaked open behind me, though I hadn't touched it. Cold rain-scented air rushed in, carrying whispers, dozens of voices, overlapping, familiar. The thing began to smile. And as I stood there, on the threshold, rain reaching for my feet, I understood the final truth we were never told as children. We weren't hiding from the rain. We were hiding from what comes back when it finally remembers your name.